Hey everyone, it's Keith. Welcome to my channel. I hope that you are having a good day. This is the second video in my Throwback Movie Monday series, a retrospective on older films. And we're starting things off with the first 9 movies based on DC Comics, culminating with Tim Burton's Batman in celebration of its 30th anniversary this year. But this is a look back at the first modern superhero movie, the godfather of them all, from 1978, Superman the movie. Superman the movie is directed by Richard Donner and stars Gene Hackman, Christopher Reeve, Margot Kidder, and screen legend Marlon Brando. And yes, I listed the actor playing Lex Luthor before Superman himself because the movie does that. Producers hired Hackman and Brando in supporting roles because they felt that would give the movie gravitas. This is a real movie. It's got Marlon Brando, Mr. On the Waterfront himself. Yeah, Brando refused to learn any of his lines and read off cue cards. Top-tier acting. Luckily, the other 3 main actors more than hold their own. Reeve's performance as the Man of Steel is timeless. It's absolutely perfect, and he's still seen as the definitive Superman to this day. He's charming, at times clumsy, at times stern, and you believe that he's that pure of heart, which is no small task. Margot Kidder throws the damsel in distress archetype that Lois Lane had been for 4 decades at that point out, in favor of an ultra-modern take on the character. And Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor is just the right mix of egotism confused with charisma and menace. He's plotting to kill millions, but he's at least trying to have fun while doing so. Superman's script was co-written by the writer of The Godfather, Mario Puzo, who wrote a massive 400-page script for an epic 2-part Superman story, which producers wanted filmed simultaneously. If it seems weird that Mario Puzo wrote this movie, that's because it is. They literally already had another screenwriter hired to do the job, and ended up firing him because they felt he wasn't famous enough. The 1970s were a weird time in Hollywood. But credit where credit's due, the script is pretty solid. And it's fairly faithful to the comics in both tone and content. Except for that ending. There's no excuse for how this movie ends, which is my biggest issue with the film. At this point, Superman the movie is kind of infamous for its head-scratch-inducing, deus ex machina, consequence-free, almost character-breaking ending, where Superman reverses the rotation of the Earth, which allows him to time travel somehow? Because he wants to save Lois Lane's life after finding her killed thanks to Lex Luthor. Superman's father, Jor-El, warns him against time travel early on in the film, but after he does it, nothing. He's not punished for it whatsoever, and the movie just shrugs and walks away from its own climax. There's a reason for this, at least somewhat. That wasn't the original ending to the film. The time travel was to be used at the end of Superman 2, but when production on that film was halted in order to focus on finishing the first one, filmmakers decided to cut and paste the ending from 2 onto 1 and figure out 2 later. More on that next week. Somehow, the ending, which is, and I'm not being hyperbolic here, dumb and lazy as hell, doesn't tarnish the film's reputation, its legacy. Because, aside from its climax, the movie works so much better than it has any right to, especially for its time. To say Superman the movie was ambitious is a huge understatement. It was 1977, and as I mentioned, Richard Donner was given the task of making 2 Superman movies at once. He was constantly hounded by his producers that he was behind schedule and spending too much money, but they never gave him any guidelines for either. While certainly not flawless, as I've already illustrated, it's amazing that the movie works as well as it does, given the pressure that was on the filmmakers. Superman the movie has a great old Hollywood look, thanks to cinematographer Jeffrey Unsworth. Margot Kidder remarked years later that she never felt more beautiful than when Unsworth was lighting her. His style of cinematography was soon to be put out to pasture in favor of harsher blacks and a more realistic-looking color palette. And that's fine. I love Blade Runner, for example, as much as the next person on YouTube that talks about movies. But no one really makes movies that look like this anymore. And that's kind of sad. And while some of the special effects look a little bit dated nowadays, for the most part, they hold up quite well. It's worth keeping in mind that Superman's production partially overlapped with that of the original Star Wars. And while Star Wars is rightly remembered for pushing the art of visual effects forward, Superman is kind of forgotten in that regard, which seems unfair. The filmmakers made sure they weren't just putting Christopher Reeve in front of a rear projection screen for the flying scenes, like the 1950s TV show did. They used a number of flying rigs, dynamic camera moves, and groundbreaking at the time blue screen effects. The results, for the most part, still looked terrific and helped the movie not feel as dated as, say, the wardrobe choices. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk briefly about John Williams' musical score. It's terrific. Not quite on the level of his Star Wars work, in my opinion. I mean, that's the highest of bars, right? But, hot take, I think his Superman theme is better than the Star Wars theme. Just the main theme, not the whole package. Please don't hurt me. Superman the movie set the gold standard for comic book films, or superhero films, however you want to word that. It influenced the way filmmakers approached the genre decades later. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman, and even Marvel's Cinematic Universe are said to have looked to Donner's film for inspiration. It was so beloved that they made another sequel to it 28 years later. When does that happen? And sure, some of it's dated, but it's impossible to make a completely timeless film. And even for all its unquestionable 1970s-ness, I dare you to watch Superman the movie today and not believe that a man can fly. Superman the movie gets an 8 out of 10. Thank you very much for watching this video. I'll put a link to the other videos in this series in the description. I'd love if you check those out too. Have a good day. Bye.
Hey, Jim! Whoa! That's a bad outfit! Whoa!